Dear students, welcome back to video lectures on operating system subject. So let us continue the topic introduction to the operating system. Today we shall begin with computer system architecture. So most of the computer system that we use today having a single general purpose processor or CPU. If you take the small computers like PDA, tablet PC, and personal computer, mainframe. So all these systems will be having a single general purpose processor. So these general purpose processor capable of executing a general purpose instruction including instructions from the user processes. Almost all the systems will be having the general purpose processors, and some of the systems are called as specific purpose systems. So those systems are meant for controlling a specific operation of a device. So those are called as special purpose systems. So special purpose systems are executing some set of special purpose instructions. So usually they will control the devices. So they are called as the device specific processors. So devices such as hard disk, keyboard, graphics controller, printer. So such devices can be controlled with help of specific purpose systems. And today, when we can talk about a multiprocessor system, so the multiprocessor system will be having the multiple processors or CPUs. Hence, they are also called as parallel systems or tightly coupled systems, having two or more processes in close communication. And all those processors or CPUs will be sharing common computer bus and memory, and also the peripheral devices. Now let us see what are the advantages of a multiprocessor system. So in a multiprocessor system, what we can do is we can execute the task parallelly, provided the tasks are independent. If there is a dependency between the tasks, then they cannot be executed parallelly on the two different systems, because one task may be dependent on another task. That is, output of result of one task may be taken as input to another task. So in this case, two different tasks are independent; they cannot be executed simultaneously on the two different processors or CPUs. And we can achieve the parallelism, that is executing two or more tasks simultaneously on the different CPUs if those tasks are independent. So with the multiprocess system, there are some advantages. It includes first one, increased throughput. So by increasing the number of processes, we can expect more work done in less time. How we can define throughput? Throughput is basically the number of programs executed per unit time, that is called as throughput. So as much as possible, we need to improve the throughput. In case of multiprocess system, there will be multiple CPUs. They are capable of executing multiple programs simultaneously. So with this, so definitely throughput of the system will be increased. Suppose that if the process has n processors or n CPUs, then my question is it possible to execute n different programs simultaneously? It may not be possible, because there will be some overhead in keeping all CPUs working correctly. And if the programs are dependent, then really we cannot execute them simultaneously or parallelly. So definitely the number of programs we are executing may be less than n if the system is having n number of processors. The second advantage we get is economy of scale. So as we already discussed, in case of multiprocessor system, some of the hardware components have been shared by the multiple CPUs. For example, the computer bus, memory and peripheral devices. So these things will be kept in common. So these are common to all the processors. Hence, multiprocessor systems can be cost effective. The cost is less than equivalent multiple single process system because they can share peripherals such as memory and even power supplies can be shared. Hence, they are economic as compared to single processor CPUs. Third benefit we get is increased reliability. Multi-process systems are reliable, but the single process systems are not reliable. If a system consisting of single CPU, if that CPU fails, then the computer system will be stopped completely because the system is having single CPU, and if that CPU fails, then no other component exists which can run the program. Hence, the program execution will be completely stopped in case of single process system. But that problem never arises in case of multi-process system because if one of the CPU fails, so there are other CPUs which can share the load of that failed CPU. Like this, there is no single point of failure in case of multi-process system. So that is called as graceful degradation. What do I mean by degradation? So due to failure of one CPU, the program execution will not be stopped because load of that particular failed CPU can be allocated to other CPUs. Definitely the execution speed decreases, so that is performance will be degraded, but there will not be any failures. There will not be any complete shutdown or failure of the system. Hence, it is fault tolerance. There are two types of multiprocess systems. First one is asymmetric multiprocessing, and second one is symmetric multiprocessing. In case of asymmetric multiprocessing, so there will be multiple CPUs or multiple processes which are interconnected through some common bus. So here the processes will be communicating to each other. So in case of asymmetric multiprocessing, each processor is assigned a task and it works on the basis of master-slave model. So one of the CPU or processor will be acting as a master and all other processors will be acting as a slave. So the master CPU, what it does is it will allocate the job to the slave CPUs. So master CPU's work is to assign job or task to the slave CPUs, and slave CPUs will be executing the task or job. And after the completion of the execution of the task by the slave CPUs, master CPU, what it does is it will combine the results which are given by the different slave CPUs. So that is what asymmetric multiprocessing. So the second type of multiprocess system is symmetric multiprocessing. So in case of symmetric multiprocessing, there is no master slave concept and all the processes are works like a peers or neighbor. So collectively they will execute the task. So in this asymmetric multiprocessing, each processor performs, it can perform all tasks within the operating system. So cooperatively they will divide the work and they execute. So that is what symmetric multiprocessing. So there is nothing like master and slave concept here. So all are pairs and they work collectively to execute the jobs. So this is a symmetric multiprocessing architecture as you can see in the diagram. So there are three CPUs which are named as CPU 0, CPU 1, CPU 2, and every CPU will be having its own set of registers and cache memory, and there is a common main memory exists here. So main memory is common for all the CPUs, and but every CPU will be having its own separate cache memory and registers. So in this case, all CPUs are working like a peers, and they collectively divide the work and execute. But the memory will be common for all the CPUs, and all the CPUs are connected to memory through bus. So these lines are indicating the buses here. So another type of system we find today, that is called as dual core CPU. What is the disadvantage of multi CPU systems or multi process system? Okay, as we can see in this particular diagram, so there are multiple CPUs which are interconnected through buses. If at all CPU wants to communicate to each other to execute some task collaboratively, a dependent task collaboratively, in this case there is a delay in the communication among the CPUs, because so these are separate CPU chips here. Now the communication should happen from one CPU chip to another CPU chip. So that is bit time consuming. So there is a communication delay happens among the CPUs in case of multi-process system. To avoid this, what we can do is, within a single CPU chip we can have the different cores. So this is called as multi-core CPU. Okay, in today's modern computer system we will have the multi-core CPUs. So in this particular diagram we can see, so this is only one CPU chip here consisting of cores which are named as CPU core 0, CPU core 1. So every CPU core will be having its own registers and cache, and there is a common memory shared by these two cores. So what is the benefit we get here? Since two CPU cores are embedded within a single chip, if at all they want to communicate, the communication delay will be very less as compared to the separate CPU chips, because the cores are embedded within a single chip here, so there will not be any delay at all between the CPUs for the communication. So that is the benefit we get out of the multi-core systems. Now let us look at another type of system, that is called as cluster system. So cluster system is basically that is what multiple systems working togetherly, that is called as cluster systems. For example, if we consider our laboratory, in the laboratory we have got around 20 PCs. So what we can do is we can interconnect all these 20 PCs and we can form a cluster. And what is the benefit of cluster? The computation power can be increased. That is the CPU power or the CPUs can be combined. Different computer systems can be integrated with the help of a local area network, and from this we can get the huge computation power, but they will be sharing some common storage with the help of a concept called storage area network. What is storage area network? The different network devices have been interconnected through a network that is called as storage area network to get the huge storage capacity. So storage area networks are basically providing large storage capacity. So here again it's the integration of the storage is provided by different systems. So that is called as storage area network. Storage area network is common, which is shared by the multiple systems. Okay, and what is the benefit of cluster system? They provide high availability service which survives failure. The cluster systems are basically providing high availability. It means the CPUs are always available to execute the task, and there is no chance of failure. If any one of the system is down or failed, so there are other systems in the cluster which can perform the task. So definitely there might be some delay in that case, but there is no chance for failure or stopping the execution. So that is the benefit we get in case of cluster system. It means the cluster systems are always available 24/7 for executing the programs or tasks. There is no chance of failure. So there are two kinds of cluster system, that is first one asymmetric clustering, second one is symmetric clustering. Asymmetric clustering basically works like a master slave model, and one of the computer in the cluster is acting as a master, which is called as which is called as the hot standby machine. It is working in the hot standby mode, while other computers are running the application. And what is the job of master computer here? Its job is to assign the jobs to the other systems in the cluster. The second type of cluster system is symmetric clustering. So it has got multiple systems which are called as nodes because they are connected through network. So if the systems are connected through network, and each system is called as a node, it means symmetric clustering has multiple nodes running applications and monitoring each other. So in this case, multiple computer systems or nodes in the cluster system will be running the application cooperatively, and some clusters are high performance computing, that is HPC. So in this case, applications that we design to use parallelism. So this is the diagram showing the cluster system. As we can see here, there are multiple computers which are interconnected. So these are connected via local area network, and there is a common storage that is called a storage network, which is shared by all the computers. So what is the benefit we get out of cluster systems? And if we provide the computation power of each of these computers, then in total we will get a large amount of computation power which can be used to run larger applications. And also we can have the network of the storages of these computers to form a large storage area, so which is used by all the computer systems. So what are the advantages of cluster system? They provide high computation power, high storage capacity, high availability, the system is always available, fault tolerance. So these are the benefits we get out of cluster systems. So let us move on to the next topic, that is operating system structure. So in this particular topic we will be studying the structure of operating system. The operating system can be multi-programming, which is needed for efficiency. What do I mean by multi-programming? Multi-programming means executing multiple programs simultaneously on the single CPU. That is called as multi-programming. If there is a single user which is executing a single program on the CPU, then it cannot keep CPU or IO devices busy at all the times. So one thing we will have to understand here, as much as possible we have to keep CPU and IO devices busy in order to increase throughput of the system. So throughput we already defined, in less time more number of programs to be executed, that is called as throughput. So our objective is to execute more number of programs in less time, so that is increasing of throughput. So the throughput cannot be increased until we keep CPU and IO devices busy at all the times. But system having single user capable of executing single program at a time cannot keep CPU or IO devices busy at all the times. So that is why what we can do is we can load multiple programs into main memory, and let us run multiple programs concurrently on the system, so that we can increase the throughput of the system. Now question arises is, if the system consisting of only one CPU which is capable of executing only one program at a time, then how it is possible to execute more programs concurrently or simultaneously on single CPU? That is a question. Here, if you take a particular program, that program may not be using CPU always. So whenever a program wants to perform IO operation, then it doesn't require CPU. CPU will not be executing that program because the program wants to perform input-output operations with the IO devices. In this case, temporarily we can suspend the execution of that particular program, and CPU can be allocated to some other program to execute. So like this, like this. Multiple programs are executed and CPU switches between the processes. So that is how it is possible to run two or more programs simultaneously on the single CPU. So what is the benefit we get out of this? The benefit is the throughput of the system will be increasing. It means we can run more programs in less time. It means as I told, to achieve the multi-programming, we need to bring multiple programs or jobs in the main memory. If there are multiple programs or jobs exist in the main memory, which job to be executed first? How it will be decided? It will be decided by some scheduling mechanism that is called as job scheduling or CPU scheduling. It is allocating a program or job to CPU for execution. So since there are multiple programs or jobs kept in the memory, and if which job or process to be or program to be allocated to CPU for execution, it will be decided by a mechanism called as job scheduling mechanism. If one program is executed by CPU and all other programs should wait, and whenever that program execution is suspended due to IO operation, so instead of keeping CPU idle, we can allocate it to some other program or job to execute. So like this, CPU switches between the jobs. So that is how it is possible to run multiple programs simultaneously on the single CPU. So that is called as multi-programming. Second one is multitasking. So multitasking means performing multiple tasks simultaneously based on time sharing. What is time sharing? So whatever the CPU time we are having, it will be shared among the multiple programs or jobs which are running simultaneously. It means time sharing or multitasking is logical extension in which CPU switches between the jobs so frequently that user can interact with each job while it is running and creating interactive computing. So in this case, the response time should be less than 1 second. What is the response time? So whenever user wants to interact with the program, that program should respond to the user request within a second. So that is called as the response time should be less than 1 second. And each user has at least one program executing in memory. That is called as process. What is process? Process is basically program in execution is called as a process. So in the time sharing system, every user has at least one program which is executing and it must be available in memory. So that is what multi-processing. If there are several jobs ready to run at the same time, then we need to adopt some mechanism to schedule the execution of the jobs. So that is called as CPU scheduling or job scheduling. If a process doesn't fit into memory, see, we know that the main memory size is limited. We cannot load all the programs into all the processes into main memory. If any process doesn't fit into main memory, then swapping operation will be performed. What is swapping operation? The process which is not currently being executed can be swapped out. It can be moved to some other memory device like a disk. So that is called as backing storage. Inactive process, that is process that is not being executed currently, can be swapped out to the disk, and we can bring a new program into the memory and start executing. That is called as swapping. So there is another concept that is called as virtual memory. So virtual memory allows the execution of processes not completely in memory. So as I mentioned already, memory, that is main memory capacity is limited. We cannot load all the processes into main memory. So few processes we can keep in the virtual memory. Virtual memory is basically some part of secondary storage device can be used as a virtual memory. where we can keep the processes. Now let us look at memory layout for multi-program systems. As we can see in the diagram, the size of the memory is 512 bytes, so 512 megabytes, and the starting address of the memory is 0. So at the beginning, the operating system program is loaded into memory, and after that we can load multiple programs or jobs into the main memory. So in this particular diagram we can find 4 jobs have been loaded into memory along with operating system. It means it is possible to execute these 4 jobs simultaneously in the multi-program systems. Okay, so out of these 4 jobs, which job will be executed first? So that will be decided by CPU scheduling mechanism. Okay, suppose that if you schedule CPU to execute job 1, so job 1 will be executed by CPU. Meanwhile, remaining jobs which are there in the memory, job 2, job 3, job 4 must be waiting, and whenever job 1 wants to perform IO operation, so its execution will be suspended, and next, instead of keeping CPU busy, we can allocate the next job which is there in the memory. Say for example job 2 can be allocated to CPU, and CPU start executing job 2, and job 3, job 4 are still waiting. Job 1 is busy in performing IO operation. So like this, the multiple jobs are being executed by the CPU in the multi-program system. Now let us look at operating system operations. As we know that, we already learned that operating system is basically interrupt driven. What is interrupt driven? Interrupt is basically giving notification about some event that are happening in the system to the CPU or to the operating system. Hence, operating system is called as interrupt driven, and there are 2 kinds of interrupts that we already learned: hardware interrupt and software interrupt. So that is what interrupt driven by hardware. So there are some cases while executing a program, there may be possibility of having runtime error. So what is the runtime error? During execution of the program, if any error occurs, like divide by 0 error. So during execution of program, if there is an instruction encountered by the CPU where it will get the situation like dividing a value by 0, which is illegal mathematical operation. So this is called as runtime error. Dividing a value by 0 is called as runtime error, or it is called as an exception. So in such situation, there will be an interrupt generated by the system, and the operating system has to take appropriate action for such interrupt. So that is runtime errors are indicated through interrupt, and after that operating system may take some corrective actions. The action could be either it can terminate the program or it can handle the exceptions. Some corrective measures will be taken, then it will continue with the execution of the remaining part of the program. Otherwise it can abort the program execution. So there are some problems of a process. It includes infinite loop. If any program or process enters into infinite loop, so unnecessarily it is keeping CPU busy without performing any meaningful work or task. So that is what infinite loop. Infinite loop is basically simply wasting time without doing any work. So the programs or processes should not enter into infinite loop, because that will be wasting precious CPU time. So CPU is simply executing the program or process which has entered into infinite loop and which is not generating any meaningful result. So we need to handle infinite loops carefully in the systems. So it means there may be some sort of protection is required for the operating system to execute the programs. Hence, while performing the different operations by the operating system, it operates in dual mode. It means dual mode operations within an operating system allows OS to protect itself and other system components. So what do you mean by dual mode? So there are two modes available in the operating system, which are called as user mode and kernel mode. So user process or user program or user application will be running in the user mode, and the operating system programs or system programs will be running in the kernel mode. So there is something called mode bit which is provided by the hardware. So this mode bit will decide whether the program or process is running in the user mode or kernel mode. It provides an ability to distinguish when the system is running in the user mode or kernel mode. Some instructions are called as privilege instruction, so which are executed only in the kernel mode. For example, accessing a particular hardware device like memory, peripherals, so it will be done by only privilege instructions which are executed by the kernel. So user program instructions cannot have interaction with the hardware component directly. So they have to approach kernel, and kernel is going to have interaction with the hardware devices. So kernel is going to execute some privilege instruction for interacting with the hardware, and they must be executed in kernel mode. So whenever any user process wants to interact with any of the hardware device, then it has to communicate with the kernel. It means user process will be running in the user mode, and whenever it wants to interact with any hardware device, then we need to switch from user mode to kernel mode with help of some system call, and the system call will be executed in the kernel mode, that is interacting with the hardware, and whatever the result we get from the interaction of the kernel with the hardware, it will be given to the user program. Then we return back to the user mode from kernel mode, and we resume the execution of the user process. So that is how a process or program will move from user mode to kernel mode from the system call, and whenever the system call returns, it will return back from kernel mode to user mode, and it will resume the execution in the user mode. It means a system call, it is also called as application programming interface, changes a mode from user to kernel, then return from a system call, resets it to user mode. So that is shown in this particular diagram. So for the user mode, mode bit is 1, and for the kernel mode bit is set to 0. So this is what kernel, and this is what user process. So user process is executing in the user mode where mode bit is set to 1, and whenever user process wants to have interaction with the hardware devices, it calls a system call which is provided by the operating system, and whenever system call is called, then we switch from user mode to kernel mode by changing mode bit from 1 to 0. In the user mode bit was 1, and due to system call, we are supposed to change mode to the kernel mode. For that, mode bit will be changed to 0. So that is called as trap to the operating system with mode bit is set to 0. Then we move to the kernel, and kernel starts executing the system call, and system call may be interacting with the hardware devices, and after that we want to return back to the user mode. So in this case, the mode bit will be set to 0, and we return to the user mode. Whenever the system call executes return statement, then we return back to the user mode. That is called as return from system call, where mode bit is I can set to 1 and user process will resume its execution in the user mode. Then how to prevent infinite loop? As I already discussed, infinite loop basically wasting CPU time without performing any meaningful work. So how to prevent infinite loop? Infinite loops can be prevented or they can be eliminated with the help of timer. So what we can do is we can set interrupt after a specific period. For the timer we have to set the period here, time here, and after that particular time the timer expires and there will be an interrupt generated. So that is why we need to set an interrupt after a specific period for the timer. Here the operating system decrements the counter. So once the timer is set, operating system will start decrementing the counter. When the counter reaches to 0, an interrupt is generated, and whenever an interrupt is generated, the program gets terminated. So after reaching the interrupt, operating system can terminate the program. So that is how infinite loops can be eliminated from the system. The next topic is process management. So before going to process management, let us understand what is process. Basically, process is a program in execution. A program under execution is called as a process. It is a unit of work within the system. A program is basically a passive entity, but process is an active entity. What is program? Program is set of instruction. Usually it is kept or stored in secondary storage device like disk, so which is passive. And how the programs are executed? So before a program is executed by CPU, that program we need to bring from secondary storage device to the main memory, that is primary memory. Then it will be executed by the CPU. Okay, a process is what? Program in execution. Program is there in the main memory, so that is being executed by the CPU instruction by instruction, which is called as an active entity. Process is an active entity, but program which is stored in the disk will be a passive entity. And whenever a new process is created, what is process? Execution of a new program. If you want to execute a new program, if you want to create a new process, we need to allocate some of the resources. So without resources, that process or program cannot perform any task. Then which kind of resources we need to allocate for the new process? So a new process requires CPU time. Ultimately, process is nothing but program in execution. Program instructions will be executed by whom? That is central processing unit, CPU. So process definitely requires CPU. Then it requires memory, because ultimately if you want to execute a program, that program has to be brought from this to the main memory. So it requires memory, and it requires IO devices, because a program during execution may be requiring input, or whatever result it is generating may be sent to the output devices. So it may be performing input output operations with IO devices. So these are called as hardware resources which are required for the new process. So there are some software resources like file. We know that process is what? Program execution. Every program takes input from the user. It will process the input based on the program instruction, and it is generating output. So for a particular program or process, basically 3 files we need to allocate. That is a standard input file, standard output file, and standard error file. What is standard input file? It is a file which is used for input operation by the process. So the standard input file which is connected to the input devices like keyboard. So whatever the input we give from keyboard will be stored into that particular buffer, and that is supplied to the program or to the CPU. So that is what standard input file. and another one is standard output file. And whatever result generated by process or program, if you want to display that, then it will make use of standard output file, where actually the output devices like monitor or filters are connected. So there is another file required here for the process, that is standard error file, and whatever the errors generated during execution of the program or by the process, so they must be displayed to the user through output devices. For that it will make use of standard error file. So standard input file, standard output file, standard error file. So these are the files we need to allocate to the new process. And also there is the need of initialization of data for the new process. And whenever a process terminates, after executing a task or job, process gets terminated. And whatever resources we had allocated to that process will be freed, and they can be reused by some other processes. And if you look at today's modern computer process, it is basically thread based. Our process will be having a built-in thread, so we call it as a thread based process. It is having a one program counter. What is program counter? Program counter is a register used in the CPU, so which is basically holding address of the next instruction to be executed. So that is program counter is specifying location of the next instruction to be executed. A process executes instructions sequentially one at a time until its completion, and there can be multi-threaded process. A process having the multiple threads running concurrently, and every thread will be having a separate program counter, because every thread is capable of executing a different job or task simultaneously. So every thread will be having its own program counter. So typically system has many processes, some user, some operating system running concurrently on one or more CPUs. Now let us see what are the process management activities. What do I mean by process management? Process management is basically controlling the execution of processes which are running on the system. In the multi-programming system, there are multiple processes created and they are being executed simultaneously, and how the execution of those processes will be managed within an operating system. So that is called as process management. Now let us see what are the process management activities. First one, creating and deleting both user and system processes. So as I already discussed, there are two kinds of processes will be running in the system. One is a user program, that is called as user process. Another one is a system program, that is called as system process. Creation and deletion of user and system process will be part of process management. And suspending and resuming processes. So while executing process or a program, if program wants to perform I/O operations with the devices, its execution will be suspended temporarily until it completes I/O operation. So that is called as suspending execution of the process temporarily, and once it completes I/O operation, it can resume the execution, that is called as resuming process. Providing mechanisms for process synchronization. So process synchronization basically required for shared resources. The resources like CPU, memory, I/O devices and files, they will be shared by the multiple processes simultaneously, and only one process must be allowed to use the resource at a time, and all other processes which are trying to use the resource at the same time must be waiting until the process which has acquired the resource will be coming out of that. So there must be some mechanism to synchronize these processes for the usage of the shared resources. So that is called as process synchronization. Next, providing a mechanism for process communication. There might be some communication happening between the processes, that is called as inter-process communication. one process may communicate with another process by exchanging messages. So why the communication between the processes is required? If a set of processes are executing a particular job collaboratively, then they have to interact to each other. So there is a mechanism provided in the system that is called as process communication or inter-process communication, where processes are interacting each other and providing a mechanism for deadlock handling. What is a deadlock situation? As I already mentioned, in case of shared resources. So if all processes wants to access the same resource simultaneously and all the processes are waiting for some other process to release that particular resource. So presently nobody is using the resource, but all are waiting to have access to that particular resource. So this situation is called as deadlock situation. There must be some mechanism in the system or operating system which can handle such a deadlock situations.